Welcome. This video features Orcus, the guardian of the oath. This is a twin to Pluto, often called Anti-Pluto, an asteroid in the Kuiper belt, which is around 900 kilometers in diameter, which often appears in astrology in place of those who represent oath breakers, to punish the wicked. As that is what it's called really when we talk about this asteroid. It deals with divine judgment or unholy distress. Orcus comes from the word urgere, which means to distress, afflict, plight, hardship, to oppress. From Greek Horkos, the god of oath. Mike Brown calls Orcus Anti-Pluto because it mirrors Pluto's trajectory in reverse direction, and yet Orcus' trajectory is only 1 year shorter than Pluto's around the Sun. Even though Orcus in its mythical origin was viewed as a guardian of the oath, neutrally, he appears to become increasingly more dark and sinister throughout time, because he appears only in form of a sadist or punisher to keep an oath. The rewarding side of keeping an oath, however, is never seen with Orcus, because the breaking of an oath leads to the worst kind of punishment, with the promise of torture and hellfire. Orcus is often seen as the end of all things, which is why later, according to Aesop, Orcus appears as a hunter of evil humans, who only appears harmless for as long as he is not provoked by evil and maliciousness. So in its etymology, a similarity to Orkos, which means border or split, feeds into the meaning of Orcus as well, as a border that appears for the human who has to maintain his integrity in a certain way, who needs to uphold his oath or the law, who needs to act in a very specific way to avoid punishment, guilt, shame, and persecution. You can also expect that the place of imprisonment, to which the punished oath breakers go, is a place of no return. So that's also what we see. Orcus is also seen as the oath itself, as the border from which there is no return, for an oath that should it be broken, there will be vengeance and punishment. Another saying for Orcus is der Abgrund des Vergessens, which means the abyss of forgetfulness, because it is associated with forgetting that which we are getting punished for. We don't remember why we are being punished, but we feel deep inside of us that we need to be punished. And often this inner persecutor is seen with Orcus individuals who may punish other people instead. And that is why often this Orcus is projected as being very negative. But there is a positive meaning for this ominous asteroid. Rolf Lillefeld interprets Orcus in similarity to Pluto, but very different from it as well. In comparison to Pluto, Orcus is much more empathic and sensitive. For Orcus represents transitions and endings, but also important crossroads in life after which there is no return. Mediality and psychic power is increased. Also the ability to cope with death and those who are on their way to die. Concretely, Orcus represents the paranormal side of death, as it is practiced in shamanic ritualism. Because Orcus maintains a close affinity to Neptune and the sign of Pisces, as opposed to Scorpio, which Pluto represents, we see a Piscean theme with this asteroid. The negative side doesn't always have to take place if you can unlock this asteroid. Because like every asteroid, there needs to be an unlocked version and a locked version. But let's talk about the today's use in language. How do we use Orcus today? Well, in Germany we say, wenn etwas in den Orcus geht. Which means, when something enters the Orcus, there is a negative expectation of something that is expected to go under or disappear. So with Orcus individuals, we deal with things that disappear, things that we forget, to find them again, to reclaim that which is lost, in order to reclaim our destiny. Celebrity horoscope. Examples for Orcus exist, which there is a prominent conjunction in a horoscope. You see it in the horoscopes of Albert Schweitzer, Orcus conjunction IC, Jane Roberts, Orcus conjunction Jupiter and the North Node, Christoph Schubert-Weller, Orcus conjunction Ascendant, Konrad Adenauer, Orcus conjunction Mercury, Muhammad Ali, Orcus conjunction Jupiter, Franz Beckenbauer, Orcus conjunction Ascendant, Thorvald Detlefsen, Orcus conjunction Uranus, and Princess Diana, Orcus conjunction the Sun. But you also see it with Bob Dylan, Orcus conjunction Venus, and Stephen Hawking, Orcus conjunction Jupiter. So you can look at these individuals for examples of a prominent Orcus in the horoscope. If you have a prominent position in your horoscope, it will be conjunction within a 5-degree orbit at least. I wouldn't stretch it too much because it's a very slow moving object. 5-degree orbit with Sun, Moon, Ascendant, Mercury, Mars, Venus, Descendant, IC, MC, hast du nicht gesehen. Any of these angles, any of these planets, look into the meaning of Orcus. So what is the meaning? Yeah? What is it? In astrology, I point at Orcus as a mummification of a planet, a freeze response for a house or an aspect. That part of a life is blocked. For that is what happens with asteroids. I mean, that's how you read it, really. Until the native is initiated through trials and tribulations. Should you fail to learn the lessons of these trials, you will be imprisoned. And you will feel that feeling of persecution and that you cannot get out and you feel imprisoned. You feel, in its negative expression, that Orcus is about an experience of being tortured. Having a contract with a higher authority may give you some kind of idea that this is how you can remove the imprisonment. And there's often negative experiences that Orcus individuals go through where they are deceived, where they go into false contracts. For example, having a contract with a higher authority that puts on a facade of being divine, like a Jehovah's implant or a Christian god or a religion. Orcus individuals always get into religion. But it can also be an interject of a tyrannical parent that does not allow us to succeed in life. Doesn't allow the planet or the house of conjunction to express itself, because we are considered to be a failure or a bad object. And that which Orcus conjuncts to, that is what is persecuted. That is what is being imprisoned and tortured and considered to be bad. To be born with sin is to be somebody who has to suffer in order to be saved. Orcus represents the urge to punish and the depression as the result of unresolved fear of persecution or punishment for something that the native has done in the past. This is what I see with Orcus. This is my explanation. After investigating it in many horoscopes, we see with Orcus there is a feeling of being prosecuted. The Orcus individual feels imprisoned, trapped, tortured, sadistically put in a position in which we fall into an abyss. But we stare into that abyss because we subconsciously believe that we need to go deeper into it, to explore the abyss in order to be saved. You know what they say? If you look at the abyss for too long, it will look back at you. That's exactly what Orcus individuals are about. And the Orcus symbol in mythology is that of a torch that lights the path through the underworld in the deepest and most wretched, decrepit pits of hell. For Orcus gives us courage to meet demonic forces in an open confrontation. At least in its higher expression it does. However, Orcus makes us feel as if we do not deserve to exist, as if the discarded aspect that Orcus conjuncts to has no right to be valued. We are a worthless object, somebody who is disgusting, despicable, or nasty. I always see this feeling of, oh, I'm disgusting, with the Orcus individual, and I will give you some examples of that. So, in your big three, if you have it there, you will initially feel as if, conjunction the sun, your ego has no right to exist. Conjunction the moon, your inner child, what you need to be nurtured and protected, has no right to exist. Or your ascendant, your identity, your physical body, and your outer appearance has no right to exist. In other words, it has no right to be valued. So that is an example of how you see it in a horoscope and how you can read it initially. Yeah, initially. Not in totality. But we get into that. Yeah. So take your time, because it takes time to explain the asteroids. So here's an example of Orcus in astrology. So there was one individual with Orcus on the sun who was born through an unusual birth, in which the client told me he was born in shit. He was born in feces. So the first experience of himself, the sun being yourself, was disgusting, nasty, vile, worthy of nothing except devaluation and discard. To get rid of yourself quickly. For you are born in shit, so you should be punished. You should be discarded. As it turns out, this person suffered from narcissistic personality disorder, from NPD. And in narcissistic individuals, our sense of self is distorted. We are completely devalued and discarded by the parent. In order to cope with the experience of complete abandonment, discard, and unholy punishment, we punish ourselves. We discard and devalue ourselves and our own being. But of course, there's no way to survive such a discard. So in order to cope with the indescribable agony, #torture, of being discarded, we create a delusional defense. We retreat into a fantasy world where we completely detach from the true self, which is considered disgusting and worthless, and replace it with a false self that is divine, grandiose, and godlike. I hope you didn't hear the screaming, but that's basically what you get with Orcus. Summary: in the most extreme cases, Orcus is about the agony of being discarded, being thrown into the underworld, in which there is no other choice offered but to go deeper and deeper into the mud, into the shit. A parent may be disguising itself as a leader or a psychopomp to guide the native into the abyss. So the parent may say, "You are trash, you are a piece of shit, you are worthless." And in order to remedy this, the Orcus person says, "Yes, I am worthless. Let me devalue and discard myself so I can be closer to you." In order for the child to mirror the parent, which is what the child does automatically, no matter what, because it's helpless and that's what it does. In order to be closer to the parent, or God, because the parent is an example of God, the native does to himself what the parent did to him. If a parent, or God, says, "You are born in sin, you are worthless," then the Orcus individual says, yes, I am worthless, which is why I will never value myself. What does the Orcus person get out of this? The covert contract is, if the Orcus person proves just how worthless they are, then maybe the parent or God will accept them and leave them alone. Because clearly the malignant parent insists that you are disgusting and worthless. So maybe if you agree, they will finally leave you alone. The Orcus person has the subconscious implant, the feeling or belief that if they discard themselves, then they will surely get the acceptance and love that they need, and avoid punishment and prosecution. Which of course they will not, obviously. So this is the shadow of Orcus. Of course, it's a bottomless pit, it's a trap. So the shadow of Orcus is, a person keeps themselves a prisoner, thinking, if I imprison myself, then surely God will come to my rescue. If I just make myself suffer, then surely God will relieve me from the suffering. If I admit that I do not deserve to be saved, then surely I will deserve to be saved. This is the madness of an unconscious, unintegrated Orcus. So what is, now after such a dreadful introduction, what is the higher expression of Orcus? A guide of the dead, a psychopomp, so they say online if you read about it. But the hidden meaning that you don't find is that of an undead warrior. Because Orcus' higher aspect is Anubis, the Egyptian psychopomp and guide of the dead. He is a keeper of a wasteland, a keeper of a desert. Because in ancient Egypt, you would go to the desert before you go into the afterlife. The desert is where you find death. And this is what Orcus has as its domain, the desert. The guardian at the gates to the underworld is a judge of divine prosecution. Because Anubis prosecutes every soul. He tests them with a scale to see if the person is worthy of entering heaven, to see how much guilt and shame lies heavily on the person's individual. If too much shame is on the heavy heart, then the person will be denied entry into heaven, and the person will be eaten by the crocodile. Orcus has an alternative expression of Wand, which is a demon in Etruscan underworld mythology, which has a sword in one hand and a torch in the other. She lights the path, exposing the demons, exposing the path to heaven through the underworld. And why is she doing this? To cut the cords with a falsely accumulated blame and shame, the disgust that doesn't belong to you. That is the higher expression of Orcus, ultimately, as Anubis is the higher expression of Orcus, which comes in form of a jackal, a dog or a ram. After Osiris was cut in 1,000 pieces by Seth, Anubis, which is the Egyptian god of leading the dead through the underworld, he collects Osiris pieces with Isis. And he brings Osiris to resurrection through mummification. This is extremely important about Orcus. Resurrection through mummification. Keep that in mind. This is how Anubis did the first mummification of a corpse. So essentially, Osiris was the first example of all the death rites to come. Anubis is the one who judges and who buries. If the soul is not pure, he gives it to the crocodile to be eaten. But if the soul is pure, then it gets buried and it gets recycled back into heaven. It gets its entry. But should the shame be too heavily on the heart, then the soul will be eaten. That's the mythology of it. And that's because of this whole theme Likewise to the Egyptian story, we see something in the dreams of Orcus people. In the dreams of Orcus people, Orcus individuals dream of being torn apart or cut in 1,000 pieces by demonic forces. So that is before the resurrection of Osiris. Osiris is cut by Seth, cut by evil, betrayed by his own family. Often by members of your own family, you may have a dream with Orcus people of being cut by them. The prosecution of Orcus planet in astrology is felt as being torn apart by vultures, eaten by hyenas, or cut in 1,000 pieces. In tarot, Orcus represents the 10 of Swords. To accept the unpleasant phase you are going through. To give another chance to revive and fight back. It's the moment of betrayal of you have been defeated, you have been cut. And now you're waiting for Anubis to resurrect you. The 10 of Swords is the last of the swords, when finally all the anxiety has led us to nothing but defeat. And we can do nothing but to pick up the pieces. Pick up Osiris' cut up body to prepare for death and resurrection. We stand at the precipice, waiting for the sun to rise again. So we may rise from the dead. This is the end of a cycle. So to heal Orcus is to rise from the dead. A planet has been mummified, frozen, killed. 10 of Swords happens to the planet in childhood. Over and over again, the 10 of Swords remains. And how do you heal from this? To give the shame back to where it belongs. The experience of defeat, of persecution, of punishment, that you deserve to be punished, is shame that has been given to you, which does not belong to you. You have been infiltrated. You have been hijacked. You have been betrayed. And now you have absorbed the shame of a family. And the shame is mummifying the planet, keeping the planet hostage. So the Orcus healing journey is the journey of Anubis picking up the pieces again. Picking up where one has forgotten or left behind. That which the family has discarded and disowned and shamed and blamed. That which has been completely devalued as worthless junk and disgusting trash is picked up and reintegrated for resurrection. Once the planet that Orcus has buried is reintegrated, the individual transforms into the higher expression of Anubis, which guides people through their shame, to discover that the shame they feel is not their own, that this shame has been implanted into them by the collective, by the family, and by God himself. So Orcus cuts the cords, performs the rites, to see the mummified, the frozen, the stiff, the worthless pieces that were left behind, so we can finally come back to who we really are and leave the shame to whom it belongs. That is the Orcus healing journey. So let's talk about modern examples of Orcus. Orcus has the word orc in it, which is not a coincidence at all, because the orcs in Dawn of War, The Lord of the Rings, in World of Warcraft, and other fiction, orc is an Old English word for demon. Yes, orc means demon. So demoness, Orcus, demoness. Orcus is an ancient god that never came to the surface. He never rose from the underworld. He stayed buried. Likewise, Anubis is the god of burial rites. So in today's world, we look at it as the evil side of Pluto. Orcus confronts the dead about the repressed shame and the evil misdeeds to hold them accountable. Finally, through persecution and final judgment, Orcus delivers the souls to torture and divine punishment. So justice is delivered through prosecution. In the process of Orcus, we prosecute. As you know, with every asteroid, there is a negative, repressed side of the asteroid that the collective does not want to see. To be a prosecutor is the side that the collective does not want you to express. Which is why we see often the prosecutor being repressed in the Orcus person. Instead of becoming a righteous dictator of what is right and wrong, the Orcus person rejects their own ability to judge things appropriately. The Orcus individual may get persecutory delusions, where the inner prosecutor is projected onto other people. Because one is prosecuting oneself all the time, one may see prosecution through others. So now the prosecutor is seen through others, and this often comes in form of a sadistic bully, a demon who loves to torture other people, because those who are tortured want to torture in return. So the Orcus person has a deep urge to torture and to destroy and to punish and to tear apart those who tear him apart. To heal yourself, the individual may try to control and tear other people apart, which of course will not heal the person. The person has to tear the part of themselves apart which is prosecuting them from within. It's a process of resolution of a shame that the Orcus has internalized. Orcus, another name for Orcus is Orcus of forgetfulness, because the pain and loss of one's own true self is too much. The deity Orcus is connected with forgetting how ashamed and worthless we truly feel. In order to avoid healing and getting to the root of one's own shame and persecutory delusions, we move on to the karmic resurrection of an old warrior. In Lord of the Rings, Orcus comes through the Uruk-hai. How fallen warriors are now resurrected to fight again. Those fallen warriors were noble elves once, holy immortal creatures which were now torn apart and put back together to fight as demons against the living. So this is the shadow that we see in the collective of Orcus people. They are supposed to be resurrected, but they may resurrect the wrong way. They may become a demon against the living. But we also see another expression of Orcus. There's a reason why I have an alternative name for Orcus, meaning the Lord of Decay. And this is something you will not find anywhere online. I made this up myself. But let me explain. Orcus is about hatred. Hatred for oneself. Internalized hatred from the parents, from the collective, from other people. People who may be extremely jealous or insecure about what you have, or who don't understand what you have. Who want what you have but cannot have it. Other people are disgusted by you, so you get disgusted by yourself. The planet that it's controlling, the Orcus, this is what you get disgusted by. Anything that the planet that Orcus conjuncts to represents disgusts you. Through this disgust and self-hatred, the libido, which is the holy life force, the inner fire, turns into the strudo. The life force is reversed to death force. That's why Orcus is an arrow that points to the underworld, to the death of things, to where life force is cut off. The person wants to kill themselves or wants to destroy that which has been devalued and discarded. In other words, a person wants to take their own life force. And sometimes, when the person does this, through destroying their own life force, one becomes dependent on the life force of others. And this is where we often see the image of a ghoul, a vampiric kind of expression for Orcus. As we go back to the orc, or the Uruk-hai, who eats from the corpses of other people, from the rotten carcass, to feed on the life force that is decaying in others, to feed on the shame of others. So when one is filled with shame, one wants to shame others in return. So Orcus may take the shape of a ghoul or a swarm of carrion or a swarm of flies, a demonic creature that feeds on the suffering and decay of other beings. But this creature, through its self-loathing, also feeds on their own suffering. So this is where people get stuck in victim mentality, which is a classic with Orcus. An absolute classic. So, dreadfulness continues with this asteroid, so let's go on to the Orcus keywords. Orcus keywords are the damned, judged, torture, ice-cold sadism, masochism, evil bitterness, inner prosecutor, brutal life-ender, massacre, violent excesses caused by fear and shame repression, torn apart bodies, and overkill. Orcus represents drastic judgment, terror, threatening and intimidation, fear and anxiety that is building up and that is depressing you. The Orcus person often feels judged, prosecuted, threatened, and evil. The Orcus person knows or intuits or feels that he broke rules and promises, and is now fearful of being punished for the same way they have been punished before. So this is all negative aspects of Orcus that people with Orcus go through. The shadow expression of Orcus can often come through an elusive trickster, or a criminal, or a liar. But also through a rule-oriented human on the other side, somebody with a typical sharp or fear-compensated pressure to judge. Orcus is really about amputation and dismemberment, but often seen also in heroic or evil battles. Because dismemberment only happens in battle, through violence. So violence is at the core of this asteroid. There's also more to this. If you look at the discovery horoscope of Orcus, it shows that the depressed or bitter, or withdrawn, beaten and lost Orcus, with threatening and unresolved karmic fragmentation and dismemberment, forces the Orcus person to resolution and shadow work. But often the Orcus person does not get it done, out of fear of not being able to do it alone. So Orcus people will often need some kind of guide, some kind of friend, somebody who helps them, to assure them, to tell them what is wrong and what is right. Who does the shame really belong to? Tell me! Am I evil or not? Please, I need to know. Often the Orcus person plays in fantasies, computer games, or in other extraterrestrial worlds. It can also be in mythology, in astrology, even the work that I do. It can also be archetypes or psychology. We find Orcus everywhere where Pisces rules, where Neptune rules. An example of Orcus is Don Quixote, who gets in his battles against other people, always beaten. But he is supported by his companion, Sancho Panza, with a healthy rationality, but who also judges him harshly. So Sancho Panza is the one who Orcus needs, so he can clarify what is madness and what is reality. This is a prevalent theme with Orcus. The mad, between fight and flight, heart-stuck soul, fights with himself through unresolved fear of prosecution and righteous punishment. In other words, the person expects that whatever they're doing will be punished. But deep down it is wrong. And the person does not know anymore what is right and wrong. And he needs somebody to be rational and critical and detached to tell the Orcus person what to do. That is what we see in the discovery horoscope of Orcus. We see Sun in Aquarius and Ascendant in Libra, right? It is all about the judgment, but it's very detached, very cold, very logical, don't we? Yes. And we also see the midheaven in Cancer. So the midheaven in Cancer is about a psychic, a mystic, a shaman, a witch. And when we see Mercury on Neptune, talking, thinking about everything that is hidden, everything that's underground, submerged, then we have a Sun conjunction Uranus. Uranus is about rejection, rejecting the self, feeling outside of a box, out of place, not being able to belong. And then we have Moon in Capricorn, constantly plagued by guilt and shame, close to the IC, where one has to hide what they feel, for fear of persecution is too much to bear. And the Mars is on the North Node, and Taurus in the 7th. So this shows the person has to develop how to confront their shame and their guilt and the blame. But the person cannot see things clearly because Mercury is on the Neptune. The person does not know what is rationally right and wrong. And we see it with Saturn also in the 9th. The house of philosophy and belief in the family, sign of Cancer. Being prosecuted by the family, Saturn in Cancer, for what your beliefs are and what is the law. The law is also the 9th house. And then we have the 11th house in Virgo, Jupiter, which is about groups, friends. So this is somebody who can expand through a group because they know intuitively so strongly what is right and wrong. They make friends very easily. But they're very critical in their mind. And it's through this critical nature that they can dissect and separate right from wrong. But they don't trust their own judgment. It comes back to this Neptune and the Mercury. In the 4th house of your attachments and your feelings. Judging what is your feeling telling you? Because you're very sensitive. But you don't know what it means. So you absorb the shame and the critical thinking of other people. You get hypersensitive and paranoid to the prosecution. All of this is seen in the horoscope, all of the traits of Orcus in the discovery. Now we can see Orcus in modern times. It has grown in its significance, but its themes are mainly seen through the fear of authoritarian punishment and suicidal terror. And this darker meaning of Orcus is only increasing in the recent years, especially with the increase of suicide, terror attacks. Because Orcus is often seen in the horoscopes of those who go kamikaze to resolve the unfinished tension between right and wrong inside their own soul. To deal with the repressed shame and fear of prosecution, the Orcus individual goes haywire, actualizes the Mars. Orcus in its trajectory can be seen mirroring Pluto, opposite to Pluto, which is why it's an arrow channeled inwards. So the summary of Orcus is, be who you really are, or imprison yourself in the guilt and shame of, oh, I would like to do this, but actually I should do this instead. This becomes an imprisonment for Orcus people. And the belief that you have to suffer in order to be saved is also often seen. So to what extent do you really live your life in the way you dreamed? Are you being imprisoned or are you feeling free? Orcus wants to record something or to secure something. It's very steadfast, very strong and detached and cold and analytical. Resolute in terms of compliance with contracts and keeping them. Strong intentions and keeping one's own promises, because of course Orcus is the warden of the oath. But often the Orcus person gets imprisoned in an oath which is wrong. An extremely desolate feeling that turns often into great cruelty or sadism. Because one has a sharp mind, but still one is incapable of dissolving the pressure and the depression of unresolved shame and fear of prosecution and punishment. So one uses torture or death symbolism to process the unresolved tension. Orcus is basically an occupant, a sentinel of a land of the dead, of a desert. We go into the desert when we die in Egypt. And there is also the mythology of Vant, the Etruscan demon. It's a female demon and a benevolent guide, which includes one who possesses a torch, a key, and a scroll. And this Vant figure escorts the dead as a psychopomp, transports them on horseback, wagon, or chariot to lead the deceased through the underworld safely. And it's quite benevolent because there's a dutifulness associated with it. To hold the key, to interpret correctly the fate of the soul that Vant is dealing with. To accurately judge them. Supposed to be in theme with you. But really, I always say Orcus is just another name for Anubis. And then Anubis is about getting real. Getting real about your judgment of what's right and wrong. The fear of prosecution is an implant. But it's also the Neptunian sensitivity that is really psychic in nature. So somehow the Orcus person has a psychic intuition of justice. This intuition is very strong, but it has been completely thwarted somehow. And the person was forced to shut down, and they're not really completely trusting their judgment. This is often what we see with Orcus people. And they just need to trust it, because obviously, according to the discovery chart, the judgment of an Orcus person is extremely sharp. A very sharp and resolute mind, very strong. But as long as the fear of prosecution and the fear of being wrong, yeah, that's basically it, the fear of being wrong remains unresolved, then there can be no healing. But should you resolve the fear, should you overcome the shame with this asteroid, then the expression is that of somebody who leads the Egyptian military, who goes to war, who takes the swords in each hand, and to cut those who break the oath, and who is not afraid of going into battle, and who understands the consequences and what's right and wrong, has a very strong Saturnian quality. So this asteroid has the nature of Saturn, Pluto, and Venus. But this is only in action. The true nature is Neptunian and Plutonian. Because of course it is all about death symbolism and endings, which is the 12th house in astrology. Finally, in order to heal ourselves, we let go of the collective garbage. That's the 12th house. The collective garbage is the collective judgment, which is why we have a 12th house in Libra in the discovery chart of Orcus. Yeah? The collective judgment is that what we are leaving behind. The collective morals of what's right and wrong, once that is left behind, we are free. And Anubis is self-actualized. But one more thing, there's another expression of Orcus which is more extreme. It happens rarely. But it's good still, I need to talk about it. Because in this case, where I had it on a Sun conjunction Orcus individual, that person was a narcissist. And this person, not only did they of course they didn't manage to let go of the judgment of the people, but they were so detached that they were completely driven by impulse. And the pressure was too much, that they were no longer able to uphold their own ethics and morals. There was no ethics and morals at all with this individual. So this is something that happens in the most extreme cases. generally in most readings, I wouldn't apply that. But if somebody has a lot of hard aspects, I take Orcus as an indicator. Because it's an indicator of prosecution. If somebody is being prosecuted by the family, held hostage, tortured, imprisoned, and shamed, and a disgust implant is in the person, because Orcus is about disgust, essentially. When the person becomes sadistic, all of this is really bad stuff, and it cannot be sugar-coated. But if a chart has some balancing indicators, and of course if a person is aware of all of this, then Orcus becomes extremely powerful, because all this tension, all this pressure, it forces the person to take action. Yeah? It forces the person to develop a psychic and keen sense for what's real, to be able to see into the afterlife, to go to the border of what's normally possible to perceive. Because you have to. In order to deal with a shame, you need to be psychic on a certain level. You need to be able to discern very, very sensitively. And that's the teaching of Orcus, essentially. That's why it's an indicator of high psychic ability in a natal chart. And it can be extremely useful. Particularly where psychic ability happens is through other people in relationships. That you're able to read people's intentions properly. To understand if they are going to keep their oath or not. If they are deserving of radical torture and judgment that is harsh and evil or not. You need to be able to discern that, otherwise you cannot actualize the Mars in the Orcus, which is the Pluto in the Orcus, which is the confrontation aspect, the transformation aspect, the Anubis, which again represents the military in Egypt. People in Egypt, when they went to war, they have displayed Anubis with a jackal's head, with swords, as somebody who brings divine punishment to his enemies, to those who want to do evil to Egypt. So that's basically what it is. And of course you can only bring divine judgment, I mean divine punishment, if you can have a judgment, I mean. To actualize the Orcus is to actualize basically the discovery chart. I mean, it just goes hand in hand. So that's why I like to show these things with these asteroids. But that's basically it, yeah. That's Orcus in a horoscope. So if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe. Tell me about your experience with Orcus in the comments, if you can. And thanks for watching.